Stop stressing about how you're going to save $2 million. Seriously, stop. Because according to the cold, hard math of the stock market, you don't actually need to save $2 million to get there. You only need to save $300,000. That's right. Once you hit that specific milestone, the financial game completely changes. Today, I'm going to prove to you why hitting $300,000 is effectively the same thing as becoming a multimillionaire, provided you understand the one mathematical secret that does all the heavy lifting for you. Welcome, everyone. Today, we are diving deep into a financial phenomenon that changes lives, a transformation that happens quietly in the background of the economy, turning what seems like a modest retirement nest egg into a multi-million-dollar fortune. The title of our discussion today is Why Most People Who Save $300,000 End Up with $2 million. And trust me, this isn't about getting lucky in the stock market, inheriting a fortune, or stumbling upon a next big tech IPO. This is about cold, hard mathematics, the incredible power of compounding, and the psychological shift that occurs once you cross a specific threshold of wealth. We're going to unpack exactly how $300,000 acts as the critical tipping point, the launchpad that propels the average saver toward the $2 million mark, often without them having to lift another finger. If you have ever wondered if you're saving enough, or if that first chunk of money actually matters, you need to stick around for this entire breakdown because the math is going to shock you. First, we need to address the elephant in the room. Why $300,000? For many people, saving $300,000 feels like an impossible mountain to climb. It is a number that seems huge when you are starting from zero, but in the world of wealth accumulation, it is actually the hardest money you will ever earn. Think of wealth building like pushing a giant boulder up a steep hill. In the beginning, when you have nothing, that boulder is heavy. Every dollar you save is a struggle against inflation, lifestyle creep, bills, and unexpected expenses. That first $100,000 takes an incredible amount of discipline and time. The second $100,000 is a bit easier, but still requires heavy lifting. But by the time you hit that $300,000 mark, something profound happens. You aren't just pushing the boulder anymore. You have reached the crest of the hill, and gravity is about to start working in your favor. The primary reason people who reach $300,000 end up with $2 million is the mathematical reality of compound interest. Albert Einstein reportedly called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world, and for good reason. In the early stages of saving, your returns are small because your principal is small. If you have $10,000 invested and the market goes up 10%, you make $1,000. That is nice, but doesn't change your life. It certainly doesn't make you rich. But when you have $300,000 invested and the market goes up 10%, that is $30,000. Suddenly, your investment gains are starting to rival or even exceed your annual salary contributions. This is the crossover point. Let's look at the math in a very simple, conservative scenario to prove this point. Let's say you are 35 years old, and through diligent saving and investing, perhaps in index funds or a diversified portfolio, you have managed to accumulate $300,000. Now, let's assume you stop saving entirely. That's right. You don't put another single dime into this account for the rest of your life. You just leave that $300,000 alone to grow. If we assume a conservative historical return of 7% per year, which accounts for inflation-adjusted gains from a stock market, do you know what happens to that money over 30 years? Using the rule of 72, which tells us how long it takes for money to double at a given interest rate, we know that at 7%, your money doubles roughly every 10.2 years. So, starting at age 35, you have $300,000. By age 45, without lifting a finger, it has grown to $600,000. By age 55, it has doubled again to $1.2 million. By the time you reach 65, the traditional retirement age, that initial $300,000 has doubled a third time to roughly $2.4 million. Do you see what happened there? You did the hard work of saving the $300,000, but time did the heavy lifting of turning it into $2.4 million. Most people who have $300,000 don't realize they are already millionaires in waiting. They just have to be patient enough to let time pass. But the reality is even better than that. In most real-world scenarios, people who save $300,000 are generally disciplined individuals who have built a habit of saving. They don't just stop saving at $300,000. They keep going. They might be contributing to a 401k to get an employer match, or they might be automatically investing a percentage of their paycheck. So, let's look at a scenario where you have $300,000 and you continue to contribute just $500 a month. That's $6,000 a year into your investment account. This is a very achievable amount for most households. If you start with $300,000, add $500 a month, and earn that same 7% return, do you know what your balance looks like in 30 years? It balloons to nearly $3.5 million. Even if you only contribute $200 a month, you end up well over $2.8 million. The point is that the $300,000 acts as the foundation, is the base of a snowball. Once you have a massive base, the new snow you pack onto the outside becomes less significant compared to the momentum the ball already has. The $300,000 is doing the work of 10 people saving. It is generating tens of thousands of dollars in passive income every single year, which then gets reinvested to generate even more income. However, the math is only half the equation. The other half is psychological. People who save $300,000 have generally crossed a mental threshold. They have proven to themselves that they can delay gratification. They have mastered their budget. They have likely paid off high-interest debt and established a safety net. This psychological fortitude means they are less likely to panic sell when the market crashes. When you have $2,000 in the market and it drops 20%, you lose $400. You might panic and sell, locking in your losses. But when you have $300,000 in the market and it drops 20%, you lose $60,000 on paper. This hurts a lot more, but experienced investors with $300,000 know that the market recovers. This psychological resilience is the secret sauce that ensures the math plays out. Most people never get to $300,000 because they withdraw their money early to buy a slightly bigger car, to renovate a kitchen they don't need, or to fund a lifestyle they can't afford. The people who break through to $300,000 have usually created a barrier between their lifestyle and their net worth. They treat their investment portfolio like a locked box that they simply do not touch. This discipline is what separates the haves from the have-nots. Furthermore, there's a concept called the aggregation of marginal gains. When you have a smaller portfolio, fees matter more, and your allocation decisions are critical. But once you cross $300,000, the sheer size of your portfolio absorbs friction. You can afford better financial advice if you need it, but more importantly, the dividends and capital gains generated by the portfolio itself become a powerful force. Let's say your portfolio yields 2% in qualified dividends. On $10,000, that is $200, hardly worth noticing. On $300,000, that is $6,000 a year in free cash flow. That $6,000 can be used to buy more shares, which creates more dividends, creating a virtuous cycle of wealth creation that accelerates exponentially. This is why the path from $300,000 to $2 million is often faster than the path from $0 to $300,000, even though the dollar amount is much larger. We also need to talk about the silent killer of wealth, which is inflation. Many people argue that $2 million won't be worth anything in 30 years. While it is true that $2 million will buy less in the future than it does today, the math we did earlier used inflation-adjusted returns. We assumed a 7% return, which is the historical average of the stock market after inflation. So that $2 million to $2.4 million figure is in today's purchasing power. You are actually maintaining your purchasing power while massively growing your lifestyle capability. If we use nominal returns, averaging around 10% historically before inflation, the numbers are staggering. Starting with $300,000 at 10% growth with no additional contributions gets you to over $5 million in 30 years. Even with inflation eating away at half of that purchasing power, you are left with a massive real fortune. The math works regardless of whether you look at real or nominal numbers. as long as you stay invested in growth assets. Another reason people with $300,000 end up at $2 million is simply that time is on their side. To accumulate $300,000 usually takes time. Unless you are an exceptionally high earner, you're likely in your 30s or 40s by the time you hit this milestone. This means you have another 20 to 30 years of your working life ahead of you. You have the two most powerful ingredients for wealth building: capital and time. You have the money, and you have the time for the interest to compound. Young people have time, but no money. Retirees often have money, but no time. The person with $300,000 in their mid-30s is in the golden zone. They possess both. If they simply stay the course and avoid stupid mistakes, the math dictates a wealthy outcome. Let's consider the reverse scenario to really hammer this home. What happens to the person who saves $300,000 but stops? We already looked at that, and they still end up millionaires. But what happens to the person who never saves the $300,000? They spend their whole life renting their lifestyle, paying interest to banks instead of earning interest. They reach retirement age with Social Security and maybe a small pension, and they find themselves vulnerable. The tragedy is that the difference between the person with $2 million and the person struggling in retirement often isn't a difference in income. It is simply that the future millionaire managed to bridge the gap to that $300,000 tipping point. Once you cross that bridge, the journey becomes downhill. The heavy lifting is done. It is also important to understand that this growth is not linear. People expect their wealth to go up by the same amount every year, like a salary. They think, I saved $30,000 last year, so my net worth should go up by $30,000 this year. But wealth growth is geometric. It curves upward slowly and then skyrockets. In the first few years, you might save $30,000 and earn $3,000 in interest. It feels like nothing. But 30 years later, that portfolio might earn $150,000 in a single year, more than most people's annual salary, while you are still saving your $30,000. At that stage, you're making more money by sleeping than you are by working. That is the position the $300,000 starter puts you in. It sets you up for the era where your money works harder than you do. This brings us to the concept of coast fire. This is a popular term in the financial independence community, and it perfectly describes this $300,000 phenomenon. Coast fire means you have saved enough that, if you never save another penny, you will be financially independent by a traditional retirement age. For many people, depending on their expenses and retirement age, that number is indeed right around $300,000 to $400,000. People who hit this number have coasted their way to $2 million. They have the freedom to take a lower-paying job they love, to travel more, or to spend more time with their family, because they know the mathematical engine they have built will carry them to the finish line. They aren't stressed about retirement anymore because the math is already solved. We must also discuss the role of taxes in this journey. People who accumulate $300,000 usually do so through tax advantage accounts like 401(k), IRAs, and Roth IRAs. This is a crucial strategy. If you're trying to save this money in a taxable brokerage account, taxes on dividends and capital gains can slow your compounding down. But the smart savers utilize the tax code to let their money grow tax-deferred or tax-free. This means that 7% return we talked about isn't being chipped away by the IRS every single year. Over 30 years, the difference between a taxable account and a tax-advantaged account can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. The person who has $300,000 likely understands this, which is why their path to $2 million is so efficient. They aren't giving away a third of their growth to taxes. Now, I want to be clear about the risks. The math assumes a normalized market history. We have to acknowledge that the market can be flat for a decade, or we could experience high inflation that erodes returns. However, the person who has $300,000 is invested for the long term. They are not reacting to daily news. They understand that the stock market is a voting machine in the short run, but a weighing machine in the long run. Over 30 years, corporate profits grow, dividends grow, and the economy expands. The bet on the market is a bet on human ingenuity and productivity, which historically has always won. The $300,000 saver is betting on the long-term success of the economy, and that is a bet they almost always win. So if you're watching this and you're currently sitting at $50,000, $100,000, or even $150,000, do not be discouraged. You're pushing the boulder up the hill. It is heavy and it is tiring, but you're getting closer to the crest every single day. Once you hit that $300,000 mark, the burden lightens. You will start to see your account balances grow by thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands with less and less effort on your part. The work you're doing right now is the foundation for the massive wealth that will arrive later. You are planting the acorn that will become the oak tree. Conversely, if you are sitting at $0, start today. Do not wait. The math of compounding is ruthless to those who start late. Every year you delay is a year you cannot get back. The journey to $300,000 might take you 5 years. It might take you 10. It doesn't matter. Start walking the path. Automate your contributions so you don't have to think about it. Treat your savings like a bill that must be paid before you spend a dime on fun. If you prioritize hitting that $300,000 number, you are effectively guaranteeing your future self a 7-figure retirement. To summarize why most people who save $300,000 end up with $2 million, is simply the unstoppable force of exponential growth applied to a significant principle sum over a long period of time. It is the psychological advantage of having skin in the game that prevents you from making rash decisions. It is the tax efficiency of using the right accounts. And it is the discipline of living below your means to allow the capital to compound undisturbed. The $300,000 is not the finish line. It is barely the starting line in terms of total potential, but it is the most critical milestone because it proves you have the grit to play the game. Once you're in the game plays itself. You don't need to be a genius. You don't need to beat the market. You just need to be there. You need to have that chunk of capital invested and let the relentless mathematics of the universe do the rest. So go out there, focus on that milestone, get that $300,000 working for you, and watch as time turns your discipline into the freedom of a $2 million future. Thank you.